I forgot to mention very important aspect with regard to national emergency. When your friends come back from break, you inform them as well. 44th Amendment Act, it introduced one safeguard with regard to national emergency. 44th Amendment Act, that is periodical approval of national emergency. Periodical approval of national emergency. Periodical approval of national emergency. So every 6 months the national emergency has to be approved periodically, every 6 months. Every 6 months the national emergency should be approved periodically. So this safeguard has been introduced by 44th Amendment Act. This safeguard has been introduced by 44th Amendment Act. Periodical approval that has been introduced by 44th Amendment Act. Now, in a quick manner, we will discuss the differences between Article 358 and Article 359. But always remember, in UPSC mains, when you were to ask differentiate, don't draw line like this. You explain each difference in the form of a small paragraph. You explain each point in the form of small paragraph. But now in your notes, for your easier understanding, you can write differences on one hand, the other hand. But in the exam, each difference you note down you explain in the form of a small paragraph. For instance, Article 358 comes to effect automatically. As soon as national emergency is imposed. National emergency is imposed. As soon as the national emergency is imposed. It comes to operate as soon as the national emergency comes to, as soon as the national emergency is imposed. But Article 359, it will be implemented only when the President issues, only when the President issues notification. So in UPSC, if you were to be asked to differentiate, these two differences you combine in a small paragraph. Article 358 comes into effect automatically as soon as national emergency is imposed. Article 359 on the other hand comes to effect only when President issues notification specifically in that regard. That's how you write one difference in the form of a small paragraph. Next difference, Article 358 deals only with fundamental rights under Article 19, whereas Article 359 deals with the suspension of other fundamental rights. Automatically, it comes into effect automatically, but whereas that comes only when the President issues notification. It deals with the suspension of Article 19 and it deals with the suspension of other fundamental rights. It comes into effect only in case of only in case of external emergency. External emergency. But whereas this comes into effect both external and internal emergency. External as well as internal emergency. Both external as well as internal emergency. It will be applicable to the entire nation. But it will be applicable only to the areas mentioned in the notification. Only in the areas that are mentioned in presidential notification. It will be applicable to only those areas which are mentioned in the presidential notification. It will be applicable to only those areas which are mentioned specifically in the presidential notification. Applicable to only to those areas which are specifically mentioned in the presidential notification. Which are specifically mentioned in the presidential notification. But whereas it is applicable to the entire nation, it is applicable to the entire period of national emergency. Entire period of national emergency. But whereas it is applicable to the time period, mentioned in the presidential notification. It will be applicable to the time period which is mentioned in presidential notification. Which is mentioned in the presidential notification. (358) ఇన్వోక్ చేస్తే నేషనల్ ఎమర్జెన్సీ ఎన్ని రోజులు ఉంటుందో అన్ని రోజులు ఉంటుంది. అంటే 6 months పీరియాడికల్ అప్రూవల్ ఇవ్వాలి కదా. సో నేషనల్ ఎమర్జెన్సీ ఎన్ని రోజులు ఉంటే అన్ని రోజులు ఆర్టికల్ 358 అమల్లోకి వస్తుంది. మీ క్వశ్చన్ ఏంటి? వాట్ ఇస్ ద క్వశ్చన్? As long as the national emergency is in force, it will be in force. అర్థమవుతుందా? నేషనల్ ఎమర్జెన్సీ ఎంతకాలం ఉంటుందో అంతకాలం ఉంటుంది. బట్ ఆర్టికల్ 359, as far as article 359, the time period will be specifically mentioned by the president. Are you getting? 1 month or 2 months or 3 months లేదా ఎమర్జెన్సీ ఉన్నంత కాలమా, that will be specifically mentioned by the president. The time period with regard to article 359 will be specifically mentioned by the president. Whether it will be in force for 1 month or 2 months or till the operation of national emergency, that will be specifically mentioned by the President with regard to Article 359. So these are the differences between Article 358 and Article 359. These differences are very, very important for prelims. Very, very important for prelims. So have you taken down? ब्रेक में जो लेट हो गए Article 358 comes into effect automatically as soon as national emergency is imposed. But Article 359 comes into effect only when the President specifically issues notification in this regard. It deals with the fundamental rights mentioned in Article 19. It deals with the suspension of other fundamental rights. It will be coming into force only in case of external emergency. It comes into effect both in case of external as well as internal emergency. It will be applicable to the entire nation automatically, but it will be applicable only to those areas which are specifically mentioned in presidential notification. Those are those areas which are specifically mentioned in presidential notification. It will be applicable to the entire period of national emergency as long as the national emergency exists, it will be in existence. But whereas this will be in existence to that time period which is mentioned in presidential notification. Which is mentioned in presidential notification. So shall we move to President rule? You take 2-3 points from your friends tomorrow. Whatever you missed by coming late, that you take tomorrow from your friends' notes. We will move to President rule. President's rule. Article 365. This Article 365 has justification from 2 articles. 356, sorry. 365 is going to come, automatically it came to my mouth. So Article 356 depends on two articles, Article 355 and Article 365. Article 356 depends on, that means Article 356 basically originates from these two articles. One is Article 355 and the other is Article 365. What does Article 355 say? It is the duty of the Union. It is the duty of the Union to protect every state from internal disturbance and external aggression. Internal disturbance and external aggression. Similar provision is available in US and Australian constitutions. Our Chief Minister सीना पीट के बोलते हैं ना, federal spirit. The pure federal models, Australia on one, US on one hand and Australia on the other hand. US, the first federation in democratic world, and Australia, the other democracy which is considered to be so-called pure federation. Both the federations have similar articles. Article 4, Section 4 of US Constitution. Article 4, Section 4 of US Constitution. మీరు ఆస్ట్రేలియాది గుర్తు పెట్టుకున్న, whether you remember Australia or not, it doesn't matter. But please remember US. US is very important for exam. The UPSC may ask comparative analysis between the emergency powers in US and in India. So already with regard to national emergency, we discussed one point with regard to US Constitution. Article 1, Section 9 of US Constitution says the habeas corpus petition will be suspended during national emergency. That means emergency in the light of war or external invasion. So now with regard to this, Article 4, Section 4 of US Constitution says, you can note it down, Article 4, Section 4 of US Constitution says, Article 4, Section 4 of US Constitution says, Article 4, Section 4 of US Constitution says, it is the duty of the federal government. It is the duty of the federal government to see that every state is run according to Republican democratic values. Every state is run according to Republican democratic values, and to protect every state from and to protect every state from and to protect every state from external invasion and domestic violence. 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 So, ఎందుకు ఇది మనం డిస్కస్ చేస్తున్నాం? To ensure this, the federal government in US can deploy its security forces in states. The federal government can deploy its security forces in states. So, you can note it down. With regard to ensure every state is run according to with regard to ensure every state is run according to Republican democratic values. Republican democratic values. And to protect every state from internal invasion. 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 The federal government in US can deploy its security forces. The federal government in US can deploy its security forces the federal government in US can deploy its security forces in states without the consent of the states. Even in pure federation, first federation, heuristic model of federation, the federal government can deploy its security forces in the states without the consent of the states. Deploy its security forces in the states without the consent of the states. Without the consent of the states. Without the consent of the states. So, to ensure every state is run according to Republican democratic values and every state is protected from external invasion, the federal government can deploy its security forces. Here Republican democracy, it refers to tremendous meaning. The government should be run for the welfare of the people with patriotic spirit, with benevolent spirit. It should not be indulged in corruption and scams. So, if there were to be large scale corruption or scams, even in US, the pure federation, the first federation in democratic world, there also the federal government can deploy its security forces. So, this is very, very important because in the light of allegations made by chief ministers, especially the chief ministers from regional parties, with regard to deployment of central security forces, investigative agencies and intelligence agencies, they are claiming it is against federal spirit. But the first federation, pure federation itself says and allows this. So, in order to make you to realize, UPSC will ask the question. I told you, no, central government is Tamanna Bhatia and UPSC is Karthi. He will be tiptoeing the toes. So, there are potential chances that there can be comparative analysis of emergency powers between India and US in order to make you to realize this fact. And don't say it is not mentioned in the syllabus. It is mentioned in the syllabus in the form of comparison of constitutional system of India with those of other countries. बस हो गया वहाँ पे. Everything comes. Comparison of fundamental rights, comparison of emergency powers, everything comes. Fortunately, you should say like this to UPSC, it is restricting itself to only US, France, UK. At the most, it may go to Japan. Not all the constitutions. Fortunate, you are fortunate enough. And most probably it will be comparing with US, because from US we adopted various features such as supremacy of the constitution, fundamental rights, federation, the concept of federation itself, then judicial review. Now you continue with regard to domestic violence. Domestic violence ante we have no internal disturbance in our Article 355. So with regard to domestic violence, the federal government has to deploy its security forces with regard to domestic violence. The federal government can deploy its security forces with the consent of states, with the consent of the state concern, with the consent of the state concern. With the consent of the state concern. With the consent of the state concern. But Supreme Court of US declared, Supreme Court of US declared in case domestic violence interrupts, exercise of federal powers in the state, in case domestic violence interrupts exercise of federal powers in the state, or in case domestic violence interrupts exercise of federal powers in the state, or freedom of interstate commerce. Exercise of federal powers in the state or freedom of interstate trade and commerce. In case domestic violence interrupts exercise of federal powers in the state, or freedom of interstate freedom of trade and commerce, that's it, or interstate freedom of trade and commerce, the federal government can deploy its forces. The federal government can deploy its forces. Example, to quell అంటే తెలుగులో పారదోలడం అని వస్తుంది. హిందీ में कैसे आता? Quell 1857 revolt, quell, like that it comes. Any communal conflict, any civil war, to quell civil war, to quell mosquitoes. So क्या आता है quell हिंदी में? In Telugu it is paradoladam. So anyhow, to quell racial conflicts in a state, to quell racial conflicts in a state, to quell racial conflicts in a state, federal forces were deployed. To quell racial conflicts in a state, federal forces were deployed. To quell racial conflicts in a state, federal forces were deployed. It may be, I think it was in 1973. It may be in 1973. You need not to remember that year, you just mention that, that's enough. So even in pure federation, first federation, these provisions are available. So similar provision is available in Australia Constitution, section 119 of Australian Constitution. But I tell you, Australian Constitution is your wish, it is not compulsion. वो extra है, complimentary. If you take meals, sumptuous meals, sometimes some restaurants they give desserts or ice cream, complimentary. It is only complimentary, it is not compulsion. Always remember, I don't want to burden you. But if you add, the evaluator may be more impressed, that's it. But it is not compulsion. It's not compulsion. But US, please remember, because any point of time, especially in near future, in the light of allegations made by the chief ministers, especially the chief ministers of regional parties, this question may be asked in UPSC. Potential chances are there. The comparative analysis of emergency powers in US and India. US and India. Why only US and India? Because only 4 constitutions we have to study. First of all, you may be thinking only 4. First of all, to study our constitution, we have to break our head. As if it is not enough, we have to study 4 other constitutions. And in these 4 constitutions, only US is federal. Japan is unitary form of government, UK is unitary form of government, and France is also unitary form of government. So if there were to be any comparative analysis of emergency powers, definitely there will be comparison between US and India. And there are potential chances because of the trend. Because recently Mamata Banerjee, in the presence of the former Chief Justice UU Lalit, in a convocational address to a law university, she openly lamented against union government. Union government is acting against federal spirit by deploying central security forces, central intelligence agencies, central investigative agencies. So in this light, there are potential chances UPSC may ask this question. So second part of Article 355, it is the duty of the union government. It is the duty of the union government. It is the duty of the union government. It is a duty of the union government. It is a duty of the union government. It is a duty of the union government to see that every state is run according to the provisions of the Constitution. To see that every state is run according to the provisions of the Constitution. Every state is run according to the provisions of the Constitution. To see that every state is run according to the provisions of the Constitution. Similar provision you have In Australian Constitution, Section 61. Section 61. Section 61. Similar provision. It is a duty of the federal government to see that Constitution is exercised, enforced in all the states. But Australian Constitution, it is complementary. It is not compulsion on your part. UPSC is not going to compare Indian Constitution with that of Australia. If it does that, ఇక మనం చేతులే తేవలసిందే. It is beyond our capacity. But it will not go to it is not that much cruel. It is cruel, but it is not that much cruel, UPSC. But if it comes to your mind, it's a complementary. If you mention, the evaluator may be more impressed that you have this much of comparative analysis like Sir Alladi Krishna Swami Iyer. Junior Sir Alladi Krishna Swami Iyer. He was expert in this comparative analysis. All the 60 constitutions he used to compare and contrast. Like in pubs, he will be jumping these bottles, no, like this. So what is this Article 365? You can note down, if any state fails to enforce the executive direction given by the center, if any state fails to the executive direction given by the center, if any state fails to enforce the executive direction given by the center, under any provision of the Constitution, under any provision of the Constitution, it can be construed. Construed ante understand. It can be construed under any provision of the Constitution. It can be construed that the constitutional machinery has failed in the state. It can be construed or it can be understood. Understood is informal, construed is formal. It can be construed that the constitutional machinery in the state has failed. 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 That means what? You can impose this thing. ఇవన్నీ డెఫినేషన్లు డిస్కస్ చేసిన బాగా, but first you write this also. President rule can be imposed on the grounds of failure of constitutional machinery. Here you add Article 356. President rule will be imposed on the grounds of failure of constitutional machinery. President rule will be imposed on the grounds of failure of constitutional machinery. President rule will be imposed on the grounds of failure of constitutional machinery. So you will be able to understand Article 365 when we discuss center-state relations. Center-state executive relations, when we discuss, you will be able to understand totally Article 365. So as of now, the center can issue executive directions to the state to maintain and protect railway assets, to see that instruction in mother tongue for the children belonging to linguistic minority group at least till primary education level. जैसे कि आदिलाबाद जो है, it borders with Maharashtra. So people from Maharashtra, they may be residing in Adilabad. So it is the duty of the Telangana government to give instruction in mother tongue for the children belonging to linguistic minority. They will become linguistic minorities in Telangana. Once I visited Bainsa in Adilabad district, my brother was saying, he worked as circle inspector of Bainsa. There are Telangana government schools where instruction will be given in Marathi because it is near to Maharashtra. So that comes under, those provisions we are going to discuss. I think it comes under Article 257. Article 351. So protecting railway assets, giving instruction to the children belonging to linguistic minority group, and what to say, to see that every state is run according to the provisions of the constitution, to promote Hindi language, Devanagari script with emphasis on Sanskrit vocabulary, then to protect the means of communication which are of national and military importance, like to protect national highways, to protect telecommunications, BSNL, this telecommunication cables, protect railway track. With regard to that, the government can issue executive directions to states even during normal time when there is no national emergency, when there is no president rule, the union government can issue executive directions to states. If any state fails to implement such executive directions, it can be understood that constitutional machinery has failed in the state. Our Telangana Chief Minister was saying that we will construct double bedroom room in railway lands as if it is his jaggery. Immediately the union government can issue executive directions to Telangana government, don't touch railway assets. If it doesn't mend his ways, Article 356 can be imposed. Defense lands, they wanted to occupy that bison ground in parade grounds near Secunderabad to construct state secretariat. Article 356 will be imposed if Telangana government occupies. Telangana, municipal minister issued ultimatum to AOC center, we will cut electricity and water supply to cantonment near Malkajgiri. Immediately under Article 365, the central government can issue executive direction. Don't touch cantonment board. If the government doesn't listen, Article 356 will be imposed. They know that is the greatness of our constitution makers. They know हमारा फितरत जो है उनको मालूम है. They know our janam kundli. They know our mentality. So accordingly, they configured all these measures. I will cut water supply to army. I will cut water supply, electricity supply to navy. They can go to any extent. They may take bribe from China or Pakistan and they may cut all these things. उनका क्या जाएगा? They have assets in England, US. They lose nothing. So that's why if they touch any defense land or defense this thing, under Article 365, executive direction will be issued and consequently president rule can be imposed. And it is the duty of every state to exercise its executive powers in such a manner that it should not violate the exercise of laws made by Parliament and exercise of executive power by the Union. If any executive power of the state is obstructing, what to say, enforcement of any central law, a law made by Parliament, again you can issue executive direction under Article 365. Like in Kerala, not now, I think in 1960s or 50s, central government employees, they went on strike. So they were about to destroy the assets of central government offices. Then central government issued direction under CRPC. It is the duty of the state government to protect the property and assets of central government. It issued direction to Kerala government to arrest these employees. But Kerala government refused. It also refused to file cases. Then High Court of Kerala intervened because it was going to lead to imposition of president rule in Kerala. Then High Court of Kerala intervened and it directed the Kerala government to arrest the employees and file the cases. So this is the significance of Article 365. But anyhow, you will understand the total significance, the total scope of Article 365 when we discuss center-state relations, especially center-state executive relations. So now, the maximum period to which president rule can be imposed is 3 years. Maximum period to which president rule can be imposed is 3 years. The maximum period to which president rule can be imposed is 3 years. President rule should be approved by both the houses of parliament. President rule should be approved by both the houses of parliament. President rule should be approved by both the houses of parliament within 2 months. Within 2 months from the date of imposition of president rule. Within 2 months from the date of imposition of president rule. Within 2 months from the date of imposition of president rule. Within 2 months from the date of imposition of president rule. With simple majority. In prelims it is very, very important. 2 months you put 3 stars, simple majority you put 3 stars. Because you will be confusing between national emergency and president rule. National emergency only within 1 month with special majority. President rule 2 months with simple majority. So you tend to confuse yourself. That's why you put 3 stars. 2 months should be approved in 2 months. For 2 months you put 3 stars. Simple majority you put 3 stars. Two months you put 3 stars and simple majority 3 stars. And it has to be approved periodically for every 6 months. It has to be reapproved periodically. It has to be approved periodically every 6 months. It has to be approved periodically every 6 months. It has to be approved periodically for every 6 months. It has to be approved periodically for every 6 months. 44th Amendment Act, 44th Amendment Act introduced one safeguard. Introduced one safeguard to extend president rule beyond 1 year, either of these two conditions should be in existence. First, national emergency should be in operation. National emergency should be in operation in the entire country. Or any part of the country. In the entire country or any part of the country. In the entire country or any part of the country. Or election commission, Central Election Commission should certify elections, assembly elections cannot be conducted in the state. 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 It should certify assembly elections cannot be conducted in the state. Either of these two conditions should be in existence to extend Article 356 beyond 1 year. Either of these two conditions should be in existence. Either of these two conditions should be in existence to extend president rule beyond 1 year. Now you put 5 star. We will discuss very important aspect. During president rule, the chief minister and his council of ministers will be dismissed. The chief minister and his council of ministers will be dismissed. The chief minister and his council of ministers will be dismissed. The chief minister and his council of ministers will be dismissed. And state legislative assembly either it will be kept in suspended animation, supta chetana avastha, it is called in Telugu, supta chetana avastha. Either it will be kept in suspended animation. Suspended animation means it can be revived at any point of time. That's why the word is used, suspended animation. In Telugu it is called supta chetana avastha. So anyhow, the state legislative assembly either it will be kept in suspended animation, or it will be dissolved. It will be dissolved, or it will be dissolved, or it will be dissolved. Dissolved means what? The end of assembly, you have to go for fresh elections. But whereas suspended animation, again you can revive the assembly. You need not to go for fresh elections, so you can revive. But whereas dissolution, you have to go for fresh elections. But during national emergency, what happens? The Chief Minister and his Council of Ministers continue to work, and Assembly also continues to work, provided they will be working as subordinate to Union Executive and Legislature respectively. Like a subordinate officer functions under the supervision and directions of his superior officer. So they will not be working independently during national emergency, but they do continue to exist. But during President rule, they do not exist at all. That's why in federal relations, President rule is more, stark than national emergency. President rule is more against federal spirit than national emergency. Because during President rule, no Chief Minister, no Assembly. National emergency, at least they will be in the office, but they will be working subordinate to national legislature as well as the executive. During President rule though, no existence at all, zero. No Chief Minister, no Council of Ministers, no Assembly. So consequences, the President takes away the administration of the state. The President takes away the administration of the state. The President can take away, he takes away the administration of the state, and Parliament can legislate on state subjects. And Parliament can legislate on state subjects. The Parliament can take away, the Parliament can legislate on state subjects. The Parliament can legislate on state subjects. Now we will discuss very important aspect, then we will disperse. Tomorrow we will discuss Supreme Court's guidelines in S.R. Bommai's case with regard to imposition of President rule, which will be very important. After that, in a nutshell, we will discuss financial emergency, then we will move to fundamental rights. So now we will discuss very important aspect in a nutshell. This topic is very important both for prelims as well as mains. That is the differences between the law made by Parliament, the law made by Parliament during during president rule and national emergency. During president rule and national emergency. Very, very important. It can be asked either in mains or prelims. Very, very important. We take it lightly. It is there in Lakshmikant also, but we tend to undermine its importance. We tend to, distinguish the minute differences between law made by parliament during national emergency on one hand, law made by parliament during president rule on the other hand. Because we think that anyhow parliament is making law on state subject in both the instances. There will not be much differences, that's what we tend to think. But there are stark differences between the law made by parliament during president rule and the law made by parliament during national emergency. So this side, the law made by parliament during national emergency, and this side, the law made by parliament during president rule. First and foremost, during national emergency, on state subjects, the parliament can only legislate. Parliament itself has to make the law. Parliament itself has to legislate on state subjects. That means it cannot give that power to anyone. But during president rule, the parliament can delegate that power to the president or the authority prescribed by the president. The authority prescribed by the president. You see, either parliament or the president or the authority prescribed by the president. But during national emergency, only parliament. It cannot give such power to any other authority. The parliament only has to legislate. The law made by parliament during national emergency is coterminous with national emergency. 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 That means what? Parliament made a law on land order. So today, 17th November 2022. In somewhere in February 2022, Parliament made a law on state subject, that is law and order. On February some 17th or 18th something, it made law on state subject, that is law and order. On 17th November, national emergency has been revoked. On 17th November, that is today, national emergency has been revoked by central government. National emergency has been withdrawn by central government today, 17th November 2022. So, the law made by Parliament on state subject, that is law and order, will automatically cease to exist, will automatically die after the expiration of 6 months from the date of revocation of national emergency. 6 months means November, December, January, February, March, April, May. On 17th May, automatically the law made by Parliament on state subject, that is law and order, will cease to exist. Automatically. No need of assembly repealing the law or amending the law. Automatically, the law made by Parliament on state subject during national emergency will cease to operate within 6 months from the date of revocation of national emergency. But the law made by Parliament during President rule will continue even after President rule. Will continue even after the President rule. Even after President rule. Even after President rule. It will continue even after President rule. Unless the newly constituted assembly repeals the law, repeals or amends the Parliament law. Unless the newly constituted assembly repeals or amends the Parliament law. Newly constituted assembly means what? During President rule, assembly either it will be suspended or it will be dissolved. No. After President rule, again the assembly will be revived. The revived assembly or newly elected assembly, unless and until it repeals the Parliament law made on law and order or amends such law, that law continues to exist. That law continues to exist. But whereas during national emergency, the law made by Parliament on state subject during national emergency will automatically cease to operate with the expiration of 6 months from the date of revocation of national emergency. One more difference: during national emergency, state assembly continue to exist. State assembly continues to exist. State assembly continues to exist. State assembly continues to exist. But during President rule, no assembly, either it will be suspended or dissolved. Either it will be suspended or dissolved. Now coming to the point, if you have any doubts, please you can ask. Tomorrow we will quickly take down SR Bommai's case, then we will move to financial emergency. With regard to any aspect as what we have discussed today, any doubt?
National emergency అప్పుడు సిచ్యువేషన్ ఆఫ్ ది పీపుల్ సిచ్యువేషన్ ఎలా ఉంటుంది ఎమర్జెన్సీ టైంలో?
No. During national emergency, fundamental rights will be suspended. But during president rule, fundamental rights will not be suspended. You can note down if you want. During president rule, fundamental rights will not be suspended. During president rule, fundamental rights will not be suspended. During president rule, fundamental rights will not be suspended. So that is the only difference. During president rule, fundamental rights will not be suspended. So president rule literally will not touch the common man. Very good question. President rule, literally it will not touch the common man. But whereas a national emergency is imposed, the police may arrest you illegally, it may torture you, so many things can happen. But president rule will not touch common man. It will touch only Raizade, political families, well-off people, that's it. That means president rule is basically the conflict between the state government and central government, that's it. But of course, when the government, the state government is not acting in the larger interest of the nation, it is trying to secede away from the main union, it is deliberately violating the provisions of the constitution, then it may also, in such instances, to protect the common man, president rule may be imposed. For instance, Vajpayee government, we should really appreciate, tried to impose president rule to remove the Jangal Raj in Bihar. When Lalu Yadav's wife was chief minister, when all this Jangal Raj was going on, it tried its best to impose president rule. So in such instances, the government is trying to protect the common man. So for your concern, Gautami, so during that time, Union government tried its best to remove that notorious government from the office. But unfortunately, the then President K.R. Narayanan sent the request to impose president rule back for reconsideration. So government, it didn't want to insult president, so it took back the decision. But later on, after some months, again it recommended to impose the president rule. That president rule proclamation was passed in Lok Sabha, but because of this great secular parties, socialist parties, they defeated the proclamation in Rajya Sabha. Because of that, that Gunda Raj continued till 2005-2006. Yeah.
ప్రెసిడెంట్ రూల్ అప్పుడు అసెంబ్లీ మీటింగ్స్ ఏమి ఉండవు కదా, గవర్నమెంట్ ఆఫీసెస్
No, government will continue to work. Yeah, one more thing you add. During president rule, the union government may appoint advisors to governor. During president rule, the union government may appoint advisors to the governor. During president rule, the union government may appoint the advisors to the governor to assist the governor to administer the state. 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 Otherwise, the governor with the help of chief secretary administers the state. Otherwise, the governor with the help of chief secretary administers the state. Otherwise, the governor with the help of chief secretary administers the state. Otherwise, the governor with the help of chief secretary administers the state. Yeah. So, government offices, they generally continue to work as usual, normally.
నేషనల్ ఎమర్జెన్సీ టైంలో కూడా గవర్నమెంట్ ఆఫీసెస్
Yeah, normally they function.
ఈ ప్రాజెక్ట్స్ సార్ గవర్నమెంట్ ప్రాజెక్ట్స్ ఉంటాయి కదా, అంటే ట్యాంక్స్ కట్టడం కానీ రోడ్ కన్స్ట్రక్షన్ కానీ అవి జరుగుతాయి నేషనల్ ఎమర్జెన్సీ టైంలో.
It depends. If national emergency is because of war or external aggression, a massive war, then in such instances such developmental works will be automatically stopped, because governments will be concentrating on how to cope with the war. Otherwise, if there were to be any armed rebellion in particular part of the country, like in Tamil Nadu, so government may be concentrating over only in that pocket. In the rest of the pockets of the country, the development administration, welfare administration may be functioning as usual. It depends on the nature of national emergency.
నేషనల్ ఎమర్జెన్సీ టైంలో జనాలు బయటకు రాబోతున్నారు.
No. That will be imposed when national emergency is imposed on the grounds of war. My parents used to say that they issue some siren, you should not come out, during night out of your homes, and you should not lit up your lights, because if enemy Air Force plane wants to bombard, so because of the lighting of the city, it can identify the human habitation, no? For instance, if you are traveling in plane, you can observe whether if you are coming across any big city based on that lighting. So, during war, the government used to issue guidelines that you should not put on your lights, both street light as well as the lights in your home. So, those conditions what you are assuming may be there when national emergency is imposed in case of full-fledged war, full-scale war, full-scale war. Yeah, anything else? Legislative council, it continues to work. It cannot be what you say suspended. क्या है उसके पास powers क्या रहते हैं? Even Rajya Sabha also continues to work. Legislative council, it continues to work. But we cannot compare legislative council with Rajya Sabha. Legislative council is dummy, because there is no provision of joint sitting. Even if legislative council disagrees or does not agree, does not react to the amendment proposed by assembly, after the elapse of 3 months, it is constituted that the bill has been passed, even without the consent of legislative council. It's a dummy. Yeah. Anything else? Anything else? Thank you. See you tomorrow.